Hi there, BookTube. It's Roz
And Tilly from Tilly Shelf.
and Scallywandling About the Books, and we're back for a discussing drama video
For December. Being uncharacteristically prompt because it is in fact the 30th of November, but I'm doing my best to create the right kind of vibe for a December
Christmassy jumper.
Yeah,
I didn't quite manage that.
Because you're wearing something much nicer. Anyway.
But we're doing this because we are unexpectedly or unusually together, so it's nicer to do that than do it by Zoom, but also because we wanted to do this in time to put it up before the 3rd of December, and there is a reason for that.
Before the 3rd of December?
Yes, because December has a kind of a murder mystery connection.
It does,
often, and lots of you will know of Cloak and Dagger Christmas, I'm sure, and we'll make a link to that below and the host for that, which is a sort of a
popular winter read along,
December long read murder mystery sort of thing. But there's a new little readathon this year, which is Christie's Missing. And why is it called Christie's Missing? Do you know why it's called Christie's Missing?
Because she went missing. She disappeared for a certain length of time in December one year.
In December. And so this one lasts from the 3rd of December to the 11th. Is it the 11th? 4th of December, which is the time that she was missing. And it's hosted by Berna of Berna's Bookish Adventures and Kevvie and Naomi's Bookshelf. So 3 brilliant booktubers, and it's got some great prompts and some great ideas, and we thought we'd kind of do this in time that we could get this up just before that started. So.
And so obviously we've picked an Agatha Christie play.
Yes.
We did last year we picked A Doll's House because it's set at Christmas to have a Christmassy kind of theme, but there is something Christmassy about murder mysteries, and that's the point of the Cloak and Dagger Christmas thing. Even though the play that we chose to read is set in the middle of summer.
In the middle of summer, in Cornwall, but who cares? We don't care. And this is the second time that we've done a Agatha Christie play for discussing drama, and I think there's a reason for that, which is that someone sitting on this sofa is a big Agatha Christie fan, and we'll come back to that later in the video. Yeah.
So we did Witness for the Prosecution, was one of the first plays that we did. We did it in March 2020, just before all the trouble started. So Witness for the Prosecution is the first play in this collection of plays by Agatha Christie, but we ended up reading Towards Zero, which was a play that she adapted from a book that she initially wrote in the 1930s. Is that right?
So the book came out in 1944.
44.
I think I got that muddled up, and the play came out in 1956. And she did do this thing where she would adapt a story that she'd used in a book as a play, because I think there was a growing demand for Agatha Christie plays. So people really enjoyed, the Mousetrap was this huge success, and
Witness for the Prosecution was great.
And so people were, I think she was probably being asked to kind of, go on, bring out another play. And so she'd go back to her perhaps. Some of them, very few of them are original plots for plays. They're generally an adaptation of a previous book. And this is, I would say, classic murder mystery whodunit.
It's very much an Agatha Christie formula. It's a group of people at a country house. There's certain things going on that means that they're not all entirely comfortable with one another. So there is a man there, and his ex-wife and his current wife are both staying in the same country house.
In the same house party.
And fitting in, the Agatha Christie archetypal characters. She's got a kind of like a efficient secretary type woman that you don't really know what her background is. And you've got a guy who's been away in the Empire. So there's always somebody who's been out somewhere in the Empire. And this guy's been in Malaya for 7 years.
Yes, on palm oil plantations.
Something like that.
There's often a bit of a gigolo character, isn't there?
Sometimes,
that comes round fairly often, and there's one of those. There's a slightly grumpy, demanding old lady, posh older woman. That
another, comes up. And they're very prone to getting murdered. These grumpy, demanding old ladies, particularly the ones that are wealthy. They,
strangely, that
serves very well for murderable characters.
There's Inspector
Battle.
Battle, who's one of her sort of
not an overwhelmingly common one, but he does come up.
There are a number of Inspector Battle books. And although when it's been used as a film script, I think they've slotted Miss Marple.
Yeah, they made it into a Miss Marple with Geraldine McKeown.
Geraldine McKeown, yeah.
Which, it doesn't really work as a Miss Marple. It's not a very Miss Marple-y kind of book. I have seen that adaptation and I think I enjoyed it, but it doesn't really fit the normal criteria for it being a Miss Marple type of Agatha Christie, if that makes sense.
So the good thing then, that means we meet a Christie's Missing prompt, which is to read. First prompt is to read an Agatha Christie book, but the second prompt is to read a non-Marple, non-Poirot Christie, and
this achieves that.
And this achieves that. So yes, it's got the classic setup, and then you, as with those versions, you get as you say the sort of the convoluted first act or whatever, or first few chapters where you're getting all the relationships and the clues are being put in there that in theory would help you work out who the murderer will be. Yeah. But they're not that obvious and you wouldn't necessarily get them.
She just has to always start with a very quick feat of character organisation, and she has to use these stock characters because she very, very quickly tells you who all the people are in this situation, and you know, and in a play it's almost even harder because she can't just describe it. She has to have somebody saying, oh yes, well that's Kay, that's his second wife, and things like that. So she has to put it into dialogue, which is sometimes a little bit awkward.
Exactly. And when was it you were last in England?
Yes,
was it 2 years ago? Oh, 7 years, really? That was the last time you met anyone.
Yes. And why did you used to come here when you were a child?
So you get all the setup, and then you get the murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the police inspectors come in.
Then yes, you get the investigation, and always there's false conclusions. You know, it's like, oh, we've worked out who it is, and then oh no, it can't be that person. Can't possibly be that person. You know, so you know, you get. It's pretty typical in that I think you get two twists, don't you? Sort of.
Yeah. Yes, I would say. I think. I mean, I did kind of know it because I've seen the adaptation, but years and years and years ago, and I just remembered kind of one scene from that. Yeah. But I found this one significantly weaker than Witness for the Prosecution as a play, and also significantly weaker than a lot of her books. But I think that's because she probably had to take out quite a lot to make it into a play. Yes. So in what you'd expect is more mystery and more twists and more like, oh, but it could be that person or it could be that person. Whereas actually in this, I felt like there's only really, I mean, there's a couple of options, but there's not really convincing motives for most people or convincing opportunities for most people. Yes. You've got very few people who you think actually would be involved.
And it's a smaller cast than it would have been in the novel because it's a play. So you cut down the numbers to a manageable number. And again, another of the classic elements, it has to be one of the people that was in the house.
Yes, yeah. They've established that it couldn't be an outsider.
Couldn't be an outsider.
It had to be,
You know, which is good because for a play, you don't want it to be a character that isn't one of the main characters. You don't want somebody. You know, it's really annoying when you get that sort of thing where someone gets sort of floated in at the last minute to be the killer.
I mean, that Agatha Christie just never does that.
She never does that. She never does that.
Yeah, I don't read many murder mysteries where that happens.
So it follows that structure. It's interesting to think about the things she had to change to make it a play. Because obviously it all happens in one room.
Yeah, which, I mean, a lot of plays move from scene to scene. Yeah. So it's a very deliberate decision to set the whole play in one room. And a decision that I don't think works very well. I think it would be a bit visually quite dull to see on stage.
But it does mean that it would work very well for amateur dramatic societies or small groups, small theatre, you know, repertory theatres around the country. You know, so probably it was well geared to the people that might have been wanting to perform it.
Yeah, and for sort of home productions or school productions, all of that. Because there's a bit of furniture moving around, but other than that, it's all just in this one room.
It's one room. So you do get a lot of people coming in one door and going out. You know, in terms of staging,
there's a lot of in and out the French windows.
Yeah, Yes. Do people really come in and out French windows? But they do. They have to because
I assume they're French windows as in French.
The doors. Yeah. They come in because they've been playing tennis or going for a swim. So, but nobody ever seems to come to the. Nobody ever comes to the front door of this house. They all come.
They all come in and out of the. Yes.
the front because that's the room
the murderer wouldn't come to the front door.
No. Yes. So, some of the things I think that she had to change. The grumpy old woman character in the book, she's actually bedbound, and she's sort of dominating the story from her bedroom. Whereas obviously.
You want to actually meet her.
You have to actually meet her, so she comes down.
But she only comes in for about
not a lot,
for a few seconds, and then she disappears again.
Yeah. So yes, it is interesting how she's adapted. But as you say, you in a way it doesn't work tremendous. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed reading it as a story, but as a play,
I think it was like reading just a normal Agatha Christie with the description messed around with, if that makes sense.
Like a short story.
Rather than but imagining seeing it as a play, I would love to see Witness for the Prosecution as a play.
Yeah.
I love watching adaptations of Agatha Christie's, but watching this as a play, the way that it's set up, I think it would lack a lot of drama, and it's just a lot of people standing around on stage and talking.
Yeah.
And she's tried very hard to put in a lot of stage directions about people moving from side to side of the chaise lounge and up onto the rostrum and down from the rostrum and really precise, like everyone's always very choreographed in their positioning in the play, to try, I think, to add some visual interest, but actually all of the interesting stuff in the story doesn't happen on the stage.
I think it would be, I think Agatha Christie is very clever. She's a clever woman, isn't she? We know that. And I suspect if I went back and read it again and looked at how she positions people in the room and when they move nearer each other or away from each other, that would actually turn out to be psychologically revealing.
It's definitely there to function as a clue. But I found, if you were putting it on, it would be really helpful to have all of that. But reading it and just reading the stage directions, I just ended up finding it very, like going back, wait, hang on. So she's standing next to the coffee table and he's moved up left. So is he getting any closer to her or is he getting further away from her?
Yes, you're right. It's almost irritating having to try and
picture that.
But
obviously that would be different if you were watching it before.
So, as Agatha Christie's go,
it's not my favourite.
And you do have favourites.
Yeah, I would say I'm quite an Agatha Christie. I'm an avid reader of Agatha Christie, should we say?
Would you like to admit to our friends on BookTube how many Agatha Christies you've read just this month?
This month, you've got to acknowledge that this month's been a difficult month. There's been a lot going on. My dear family has been ill, so I've needed, comfort reading that wasn't too serious. So I've read 10 Agatha Christie books this month, and they typically take me about 2-3 hours to read. I've read more than one in a day on a couple of occasions this month.
And to put it into context, how many books have you read overall this month?
16.
So
all of the ones that weren't Agatha Christie's that I read one book of poetry, and the rest were all non-fiction for non-fiction November. So
it's a nice balance with reading a lot of non-fiction to read, but
I didn't intend to read that much Agatha Christie. My plan was to read just non-fiction for non-fiction November and then read all the Agatha Christie's in December. But then, once you read one, I find that once I read one, I just want to keep reading.
It's a bit like
they're a bit addictive.
It's a bit like a bag of toffees, isn't it?
Yeah.
you unwrap one and then you think, I could just have another.
Yeah, and they're so short and simple, and you just read them and then they're just done, and then you've read a book.
So that's exceptional. But about how many Agatha Christie's would you think you've read overall?
So overall, I was looking at the list of her works in the front of that. Overall, I'm sure I've read 25, and there are a couple of others where I think I've either read them or watched the adaptation sort of 10-15 years ago when I was getting them out of the library when I used to live.
And it always interests me that you actually have reread a lot. Yeah. Some of those you've read multiple times.
Of the ones that I've read this month, the 10 that I've read this month, all but Towards Zero, this play, were rereads. And I always find the idea of rereading a murder mystery. Oh, I forget. This is the wonderful thing. I don't really understand how, but I forget who the killer was. I forget how it all all worked. So then I think, well, I should know the answer. And then you kind of get halfway through and you think, oh, yes, that's right, because she's actually her sister. Yeah. And, all of those things. And then you feel clever because you've remembered. Even, you haven't solved it, but you've just kind of remembered what you've done before.
When did you read your first Agatha Christie, do you think? Roughly. I mean...
I don't know. Teenage years?
As a teenager?
Yeah. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
I know... I think I probably saw bits of things like Poirot on television and then ended up reading them.
Yeah, and there were a few sort of knocking around the house.
And they had a selection in the library, as I've said, and and now every time I go into a second-hand bookshop, I'm looking out for them because I know that I want to have more and more to choose from. I prefer Miss Marple, but there's a limited number of Miss Marples.
Now, I was going to ask you that, actually. That was one of the questions in my mind. It's like, do you have a favourite type of Agatha Christie book?
Absolutely. I love Miss Marple.
Miss Marple is
because she's just that great, and I love knowing the way that people talk about her, and I love the dismissing that they do, and her little quiet. Oh, that is interesting, and when Miss Marple says, "Oh, that is interesting," then you're like, aha. That's the important clue. I've just got to work out why she thinks that's interesting. So I like that, and I like the Miss Marples always end with a trap. So she works out who's done it because of her amazing knowledge of human nature acquired by living in a village, as she always says.
Absolutely, and her careful observation.
Yes.
And being underestimated.
Yeah, because everybody thinks she's just an old lady.
Well, yes. Because they haven't heard about all these other times that she's told.
Or even if they have, they just don't really believe it.
No.
And then she realises who it is, but she can't prove it because it's all just from her observation skills. So then she sets a trap. And she persuades somebody to be very brave and nearly get murdered, and then she catches the murderer red-handed, and that's the typical ending for Miss Marple.
So Marples are your favourite. Which is your favourite? Or say top 2 or 3, to be fair, and rather than force you to choose one, your top 2 or 3 Agatha Christie's, books overall.
I would say. And Then There Were None. I've read time and again. I really love that.
I love
actually.
that. That's
just the way it all fits together.
It's such a well constructed book. Yeah.
And A Pocket Full of Rye. I quite like. I like the ones that kind of theming around a nursery rhyme. I find that quite an interesting technique, and it's quite a conceit, isn't it? But I just enjoy it.
Yes.
And then The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I think that is fantastically clever. I didn't enjoy it as much on the reread, but on the first read, I was just astonished by how well it just. I just really enjoyed the completion of it.
Yeah. And so those would be your particular recommendations to
readers.
To readers.
And I do really like Witness for the Prosecution, and there was quite a good. If you prefer watching these things, I think the screen adaptation of Witness for the Prosecution a couple of years ago was very good.
Really? Yes, first rate actually. Yeah.
Very spooky, but not spooky, but very unnerving, I suppose.
Yeah. So if you were saying to people why they should read Agatha Christie, what would be your?
It's just a light read, and it's just a read for pleasure.
Yeah.
I would say,
but it's not a mindless read.
No, because you're kind of puzzling it out. I would say one of the interesting things about Agatha Christie, and the more you read, is she covers a good portion of the middle of the 20th century.
Yes.
And she does tell you a lot about changes in British society, particularly kind of upper middle class society, from the first Poirots and stuff are set during the First World War, and then you come up to she's writing in the 1970s, and she's writing about how odd that 1970s world feels like to somebody who's used to who's got this kind of 1920s 30s kind of background to them. So you know, like the difficulties with servants and gardeners and stuff that comes up, and then she kind of goes into a bit of kind of Cold War-y type stuff, and she starts mentioning a lot of spies and stuff, and like I suppose she's often, in all honesty, she's often quite unpleasant in the way that she handles characters who aren't British, or characters from different parts of the British Empire, and I don't like that aspect, but I do find it interesting to see the way that those attitudes are presented in these books, I suppose. And the way that she sometimes makes it her character, she writes characters who are even more unpleasant, and kind of see, you can kind of see the
So it's
the social setting, I suppose.
It's a real. I mean, I always feel that she's a real window into a sort of English society in the 20th century, isn't she? She
upper middle class mindset, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, in its all of its unpleasantness as well. Particularly the classic Miss Marple of just how evil everybody is. Really.
Brilliant. Well, do you think that's where we should stop?
Yes,
Is there anything that we haven't talked about in relation to this? No, I don't think so. So this is a happy pre-Christmas.
Yeah.
And enjoy your Cloak and Dagger reading and your Christie's Missing.
Yeah. And I think I'll probably be reading more Agatha Christie's for both of those.
Yeah.
Well, there's four plays in this. So I've got two that are brand
two more
new
plays
to me.
to read, and I'm going to read the Sitterford mystery, which is the Christie's Missing sort of group read.
Yeah.
Because it's set on Dartmoor, and I love books set on Dartmoor. So happy December, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.